Briella Lawson, 27, had spent her entire life being the family's unpaid servant. Her parents' constant exploitation felt inescapable, until her grandfather's funeral changed everything. The envelope he left her contained more than just his will. It revealed a family secret so explosive it would shatter the power dynamic forever. Little did her parents know, their years of mistreatment were about to trigger a karmic avalanche they couldn't escape. Before I dive into how my grandfather's funeral became the turning point that freed me from years of family servitude, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever felt undervalued by family, and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Trust me, you'll want to see how this family revenge drama unfolds when justice finally arrives. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I never understood why I was treated differently from my 3 siblings. Our 2-story colonial home looked picture-perfect from the outside: manicured lawn, white picket fence, and a family that appeared to embody the American dream. But behind closed doors, my reality was starkly different. From my earliest memories around age 5, I was assigned responsibilities while my siblings played. What started as simple tasks, like picking up toys, evolved into cooking breakfast by age 9, doing everyone's laundry by 12, and managing household bills by 15. My mother, Eleanor, a successful corporate attorney, would inspect my work with calculated coldness, pointing out invisible dust particles or slightly wrinkled shirts. "Briella, if you can't do these simple tasks correctly, how will you ever succeed in life?" she would say with that dismissive sigh I grew to dread. My father, Richard, a high school principal, ironically celebrated in the community for his compassionate approach to education, was no better. He delegated all household maintenance to me, from fixing leaky faucets to repainting rooms, while my siblings received allowances for simply existing. The contrast was painfully obvious during family dinners when I would serve everyone before finally sitting down with my plate, usually to hear conversations about my siblings' accomplishments, while my straight-A report cards went unmentioned. The disparity in how we were treated extended beyond chores. My brother Marcus received a car for his 16th birthday. My sisters Penelope and Victoria got elaborate Sweet 16 parties. For my 16th, I received a new vacuum cleaner with a note that read, "To help you be more efficient." I cried myself to sleep that night, wondering what I had done to deserve such different treatment. Only my grandfather Harold seemed to notice. During his monthly visits, he would watch with furrowed brows as I moved around the house like a shadow, serving and cleaning. Sometimes he'd catch my eye and give me a sad smile that somehow contained both apology and encouragement. Once, when I was 15, he caught me alone in the kitchen and said, "You're worth more than how they see you, Briella. One day you'll understand everything." I didn't know what he meant then, but his words became a small flame of hope I carried. School became my sanctuary. There I wasn't the family maid, but a bright student with potential. My English teacher, Mrs. Abernathy, particularly took notice of my writing talent and encouraged me to apply to colleges. "You have a voice that deserves to be heard," she told me, words so foreign to my experience that I almost couldn't absorb them. Despite maintaining perfect grades, my parents made it clear that college wasn't in my future. "Someone needs to help around the house," my mother stated matter-of-factly, when I brought home college brochures. Meanwhile, they hired tutors and college consultants for my siblings, all of whom were average students at best. By the time I graduated high school as valedictorian, a ceremony my parents attended only because it would look bad if they didn't, I had secretly applied to several colleges. When acceptance letters arrived, including a full scholarship to Boston University, my mother discovered them and tore them to shreds before my eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Briella. Who would take care of the family if you left?" The devastation I felt that day hardened something inside me. I remained at home finding a job as an administrative assistant that barely paid enough for me to save anything after contributing to household expenses, a requirement my parents imposed on me alone. My siblings all went to college, their educations fully funded by our parents. They rarely came home, and when they did, they treated me with the same dismissive attitude our parents had modeled. For years, I wondered what made me so different, so unworthy of love and opportunity. Was it something I'd done as a child? Was I adopted? The questions haunted me, but whenever I gathered the courage to ask, I was shut down immediately. "Stop being dramatic, Briella," my father would say. "This family has given you everything." The only bright spot in my existence was my relationship with Grandfather Harold. During our rare private conversations, usually when I drove him home from family gatherings, he would tell me I was stronger than I knew, and that patience would eventually reward me. "Keep your head up and your eyes open," he would say. "The truth has a way of surfacing like a cork held under water too long." I never imagined how prophetic those words would become, or that his funeral would be the catalyst for my liberation. But first I had to endure 7 more years of being the family doormat, watching my siblings build successful lives while I remained trapped in a cycle of servitude that seemed impossible to break. The night before Grandfather Harold's unexpected passing, he called me something he rarely did. "Briella," he said, his voice weaker than I'd ever heard it, "remember that you are a Lawson through and through, more than any of them. Never forget that." The cryptic nature of his words confused me, but I would soon understand their profound meaning. The day of Grandfather Harold's funeral arrived with an appropriately somber gray sky. I had been up since dawn, helping my mother coordinate the reception details, pressing my father's and siblings' formal attire, and preparing myself last. No one acknowledged the dark circles under my eyes, or thanked me for handling the countless phone calls from relatives. It was expected I was the family workhorse after all. St. Michael's Episcopal Church was filled to capacity. My grandfather had been beloved in the community. I sat at the end of our family row, furthest from the center aisle, almost an afterthought. Throughout the service, I noticed Mr. Fleming, my grandfather's attorney, watching our family with particular intensity. His gaze lingered on me several times, which I found peculiar but dismissed as coincidence. After the burial, Mr. Fleming approached me directly, bypassing my father, who stood expectantly nearby. "Miss Lawson," he said quietly, "your grandfather left specific instructions that I speak with you privately before addressing the rest of the family. Could you meet me at my office at 4 this afternoon?" My father overheard and immediately inserted himself into the conversation. "Whatever you need to discuss can be shared with the whole family," he stated, firmly placing a possessive hand on my shoulder. Mr. Fleming's expression remained professional but resolute. "I'm afraid these were Mr. Lawson's explicit instructions, and as the executor of his will, I am bound to follow them to the letter. Briella must come alone initially." The use of my first name suggested a familiarity that surprised me. My mother stepped forward, her funeral-appropriate makeup not hiding her displeasure. "This is highly irregular. Richard is Harold's son, surely any family matters should go through him first." "Mrs. Lawson," Mr. Fleming replied with practiced patience, "I understand your concern, but these were the deceased's wishes. Briella must be the first to receive certain information. The family meeting will follow tomorrow at my office." My parents exchanged looks loaded with both confusion and annoyance. I stood frozen, equally confused, but also experiencing an unfamiliar flutter of importance. For once, I was being singled out for something other than additional work. "Fine," my father conceded tersely. "Briella, you'll report back to us immediately after the meeting." Later that afternoon, I sat across from Mr. Fleming in his wood-paneled office, nervous and uncertain. He regarded me with kind eyes before retrieving a sealed envelope from his desk safe. "Your grandfather wanted you to read this privately before I explain further," he said, handing me the envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. My dearest Briella, if you're reading this, I've finally gathered the courage to tell you the truth, though too late for us to discuss it face to face. This cowardice is my greatest regret. You've wondered all your life why you've been treated differently. The answer lies in events that occurred before you were born. Your father Richard is not my biological son. Your grandmother had an affair resulting in his birth. I chose to raise him as my own and never revealed this truth to him or anyone else. The cruel irony, my dear granddaughter, is that you are more directly descended from the Lawson bloodline than your father or siblings. Your mother is my niece, my brother's daughter, making you my great-niece as well as my legal granddaughter. The family resemblance I see in you is undeniable. You have my mother's eyes and determination. Your parents know this truth. I confronted them when I noticed how differently they treated you, suspecting they somehow blamed you for the complicated family tree. They swore they would correct their behavior. They clearly broke that promise. I've watched you suffer in silence for too long. My failure to intervene more forcefully will haunt me into eternity. But I can still offer you freedom and the recognition you deserve. With love and regret, Grandfather Harold, I looked up at Mr. Fleming, tears streaming down my face, my world completely upended. Is this true? I whispered. He nodded solemnly. Yes, Miss Lawson. Your grandfather confirmed everything with extensive documentation before his passing. He slid a folder across the desk. These are DNA test results from 5 years ago, along with birth certificates and additional evidence. Your grandfather wanted you to have irrefutable proof. But why would they treat me worse if I'm more directly related to the Lawson family? I asked, struggling to make sense of it all. Your grandfather believed it was a complex psychological reaction. Your father may have unconsciously suspected the truth about his parentage and resented the stronger family resemblance you carry. Your mother likely harbored guilt about the family connection never being disclosed. Together they projected their complications onto you. As the reality settled over me, Mr. Fleming cleared his throat. There's more, Miss Lawson. Your grandfather has made you the primary beneficiary of his estate. My breath caught. What does that mean exactly? It means, Miss Lawson, that you have inherited his house, his investments, and 70% of his considerable financial assets. The remaining 30% is divided among your siblings with nothing directly allocated to your parents. The room seemed to spin around me. Grandfather Harold's final act had not just revealed the truth, it had completely reversed the power dynamic that had defined my entire existence. There's one more thing, Mr. Fleming added, his expression softening. Your grandfather established a trust that fully funded your education at any institution you choose to attend. He believed it was long overdue. As I sat there, letter in hand and future suddenly wide open, I realized that tomorrow's family meeting would change everything forever. The reckoning was coming, and for the first time in my life I held the power. The atmosphere in Mr. Fleming's conference room the following day was charged with tension. My parents and siblings arrived together, presenting their usual united front. I had chosen to arrive separately, having spent the night in a hotel, my first act of independence funded by a small advance Mr. Fleming had provided from my inheritance. When they saw me sitting next to Mr. Fleming at the head of the table, their expressions ranged from confusion to irritation. My mother immediately tried to assert control, gesturing for me to move to the other side of the table. Briella, please sit with the family, she said in that commanding tone. I'd obeyed all my life. I am exactly where I belong, Mother, I replied calmly, surprising even myself with my steadiness. Something had shifted inside me since reading my grandfather's letter. The weight of inadequacy I'd carried for decades had begun to lift, replaced by righteous clarity. My father frowned. What's going on here, Briella? What did you discuss yesterday that you failed to report back to us as instructed? Mr. Fleming intervened before I could respond. Mr. Lawson, I'll be conducting this meeting according to the wishes of the deceased. Please, everyone take a seat. His authoritative tone left no room for argument. Once everyone was seated, Mr. Fleming began. Harold Lawson left specific instructions regarding the reading of his will and the disclosure of certain family information. Yesterday, Miss Briella received some personal correspondence from her grandfather. Today, I'll be addressing the entire family regarding the distribution of assets. My mother leaned forward, her professionally manicured nails tapping impatiently on the polished table. Let's get to the point, shall we? What are the terms of my father-in-law's will, Mr. Fleming's expression remained neutral as he delivered the news that would change everything. The majority of Harold Lawson's estate, including his residence investment portfolio and 70% of his liquid assets, has been bequeathed to his granddaughter Briella Lawson. The room erupted in chaos. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is preposterous. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Fleming replied firmly, sliding copies of the will across the table. The remaining 30% is divided equally among Marcus Penelope and Victoria Lawson. Richard and Eleanor Lawson are not beneficiaries. My siblings stared at me with a mixture of shock and growing hostility. Marcus, always the most entitled, was the first to speak. This makes no sense. Why would grandfather leave everything to Briella? She barely even spoke to him. I couldn't hold back my bitter laugh. I drove him home from every family gathering. I called him weekly. I was the only one who remembered his birthday without Facebook reminders. When was the last time any of you spent more than 5 minutes with him without checking your phones? Victoria, the youngest and usually the most self-absorbed, had tears forming in her eyes, though whether from genuine grief or thwarted expectations was unclear. This isn't fair. Briella already lives at home rent-free. She doesn't need a house. Rent-free, I echoed in disbelief. I've paid household contributions since I was 18, more than any of you ever contributed. I've cooked, cleaned, and maintained that house while working full-time, all while you were enjoying college experiences. I was denied. My mother's face had gone pale, a rare sight for someone so typically composed. Mr. Fleming, there must be grounds to contest this. Harold wasn't in his right mind toward the end. I assure you, Mrs. Lawson, your father-in-law was of completely sound mind. He had thorough psychological evaluations done specifically to prevent such challenges. Mr. Fleming's tone was professional, but left no doubt about the futility of their objections. My father, who had been unnaturally quiet, suddenly fixed me with an intense stare. What else did he tell you, Briella? There was fear behind his anger, the fear of a man who suspects his secrets are about to be exposed. The moment had come. I pulled out my grandfather's letter and the DNA test results. He told me everything, Dad. About grandmother's affair. About you not being his biological son. I laid the documents on the table. About Mom being his niece, making me more directly related to the Lawson bloodline than any of you. The color drained from both my parents' faces. My siblings looked bewildered, trying to process this bombshell revelation. That's why you treated me like a servant all these years, isn't it? I continued, years of suppressed emotion finally breaking through, because I was a constant reminder of the family secret. Because every time you looked at me you saw the Lawson features that Dad doesn't have. My mother recovered first, her legal training kicking in as she attempted to regain control. These are absurd allegations. Harold was clearly confused. Stop lying, Mother. I slammed my hand on the table with such force that everyone flinched. The DNA tests are right here. Grandfather confronted you both years ago about how you treated me. You promised him you'd change, but you never did. My father collapsed back into his chair, suddenly looking decades older. He told us he would never reveal this to anyone, he whispered. He promised. And you promised to treat your daughter with love and dignity. Mr. Fleming interjected, his professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine disgust. Harold kept his promise until he saw that you would never keep yours. My siblings were processing this information with varying degrees of comprehension. Marcus looked between our parents with growing anger, while Penelope and Victoria huddled together whispering frantically. "So what happens now?" Marcus finally asked, directing his question to Mr. Fleming, rather than our parents. "Is everything we thought about our family a lie?" "Not everything," I answered before Mr. Fleming could respond. "Just the parts they wanted to hide." I turned to face my parents directly. "You could have loved me. You could have treated all your children equally despite these complications. That was your choice." My mother's expression hardened into the cold mask I knew so well. "You have no idea the complexities of adult relationships, Briella. We did the best we could in a difficult situation." "No, you didn't," I replied simply. "Your best would have been treating me like your daughter, not your maid. Your best would have been supporting my education like you did for Marcus, Penelope, and Victoria. Your best would have been telling me the truth instead of punishing me for it." For the first time in my life, I saw something like shame flicker across my father's face. "Briella," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "You have to understand I don't have to understand anything anymore," I interrupted, standing up. "What I do have to do is decide what happens next, and for that I need time to think." I gathered my documents and turned to Mr. Fleming. "I'll call you tomorrow to discuss next steps for the estate transfer." Then I addressed my stunned family. "I'll be moving my things out of the house this weekend. I suggest you all use this time to reflect on the family dynamics you've participated in and benefited from." As I walked toward the door, my sister Penelope called out, "Briella, wait, you can't just drop this bomb and leave. What about us? What about the family?" I paused at the threshold and looked back at the people who had defined my existence for 27 years. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first. The family will be whatever we decide to make it moving forward, but it will never again be what it was. With those words, I walked out of the conference room, my back straight and my heart pounding with a mixture of grief, vindication, and the terrifying exhilaration of freedom. I wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was certain: I would never be anyone's servant again. The truth had finally surfaced, just as Grandfather Harold had predicted. And now it was time to build the life I'd been denied for so long. The week following the will reading was a whirlwind of emotion and activity. I rented a small storage unit and methodically packed my belongings, surprisingly few for someone who had lived 27 years in the same house. Most of my possessions were functional rather than sentimental. My parents had rarely indulged me with gifts that weren't somehow related to household maintenance. When I arrived at the house to collect my things, I found it eerily quiet. My mother had left a terse note, saying she and my father were staying at a hotel to process recent events and would appreciate me being gone by their return. The calculated coldness of their absence during this pivotal moment in my life confirmed I was making the right decision. I was carefully wrapping the few framed photos I wanted to keep when Victoria appeared in my doorway. At 23, she was the sibling I had the most complex relationship with, sometimes showing brief moments of kindness before reverting to the dismissive attitude she'd learned from our parents. "So you're really leaving?" she said, not quite a question. "Yes," I replied, continuing to pack. "I'm staying at the Residence Inn until I decide what to do with Grandfather's house." Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "Are you going to sell it?" The question carried weight beyond real estate. It was really asking if I planned to sever all family connections. "I haven't decided yet." I paused, looking directly at her. It's strange to suddenly have choices after a lifetime of having none. She had the grace to look somewhat ashamed. "I never really thought about it that way, that you didn't have choices, I mean." "That was by design," I said, taping up a box labeled books. It's easier to exploit someone when you normalize their lack of options from childhood. Victoria winced. "That sounds so harsh when you say it like that." It was harsh to live it, I countered, no longer willing to soften truths to make others comfortable. A heavy silence fell between us. Finally, Victoria spoke again. Marcus is furious. He's talking about contesting the will, saying grandfather must have been manipulated. She paused. Penelope is mostly in shock, I think. She keeps saying she had no idea how you were treated differently. I'm not sure I believe her. I laughed without humor. She noticed enough to happily let me do her laundry and make her lunch every day throughout high school. Victoria nodded slowly. And what about me? Did I? Or was I as bad as them? The question caught me off guard. None of my family members had ever asked for my perspective on their behavior. You were younger, I said carefully. You followed their lead like children do. But yes, you accepted their treatment of me as normal and benefited from it. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, Briella. I really am. I never stopped to question why you were always working while the rest of us weren't. Her apology, though, seemingly genuine, came after a lifetime of indifference and only after my financial situation had dramatically improved. I wasn't ready to offer forgiveness so quickly. Thank you for saying that, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. I hope it's the beginning of you questioning other assumptions too. Mom and Dad have been fighting non-stop, she volunteered after another awkward silence. Dad keeps saying he never wanted things to go this far, whatever that means. Mom just repeats that they did what they had to do. This glimpse into my parents' reaction intrigued me. And what do you think, now that you know the truth about our family? Victoria looked lost, younger than her years. I don't know what to think. Everything I believed about our family feels like a lie. She hesitated. But it doesn't explain why they treated you the way they did. Even if Dad isn't biologically grandfather's son, that's not your fault. And Mom, being grandfather's niece, makes you even more a Lawson, not less. It just doesn't make sense. Sometimes people's cruelty doesn't make logical sense, I replied, sealing the last box. It's about their own insecurities and fears. In a twisted way, I think they resented me for representing a truth they wanted to hide. Every time they looked at me, they saw Grandfather Harold and the Lawson lineage that Dad didn't truly share. Victoria shook her head. It's still wrong. No matter how they felt, they shouldn't have treated you like that. No, I agreed, they shouldn't have. As I loaded the final box into my car, Victoria hovered nearby. What happens now, to all of us? I paused, considering her question seriously. That depends on each of you. I'm going to take some time to figure out what I want my life to be. After that, I'll decide what kind of relationship, if any, I want with each family member based on their actions moving forward, not just their words. And Mom and Dad, she asked hesitantly. They've had 27 years to treat me with basic human dignity and failed. I don't owe them an immediate path to reconciliation. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand. For what it's worth, I hope we can find some way to have a relationship. A real one this time. As I drove away from the house that had been my prison for so long, I felt an overwhelming mixture of emotions, grief for the family. I never truly had anger at the years stolen from me, but also a fragile hope for what might be possible in this new chapter of my life. 3 days later, my father appeared at my hotel room door unannounced. He looked disheveled, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Briella, he said, his voice hoarse, we need to talk. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but another part, perhaps the part that had always craved his approval, wanted to hear what he had to say. You can come in, but I don't have much time, I lied, suddenly needing to establish boundaries. He sat awkwardly on the edge of the desk chair while I remained standing. Your mother doesn't know I'm here, he began, as if this shared secret might create a bond between us. That doesn't surprise me, I replied neutrally. He ran a hand through his graying hair. What Harold did, revealing family secrets this way, it was cruel. Crueler than forcing your daughter to be your unpaid housekeeper for 27 years. Crueler than denying her an education while funding her siblings. Crueler than making her feel worthless in her own home. My voice remained steady, despite the emotions churning inside me. My father had the decency to look ashamed. We never saw it that way. We thought we were teaching you responsibility, preparing you for the real world. Did Marcus, Penelope, and Victoria not need preparation for the real world? I challenged. Or just me? He had no answer for that. Why are you here, Dad? I finally asked when the silence became unbearable. He seemed to struggle with his words. I'm trying to understand how we move forward from here. As a family. The audacity of his assumption that I would want to continue any kind of family relationship stunned me. Move forward, I repeated. You're asking how we maintain a family connection now that the power dynamic has changed. Now that I have what you want, grandfather's money and property. That's not fair, Briella. This isn't about money. Isn't it? I asked. You never once advocated for me when I was dependent on you. You never once stood up to Mother when she criticized everything I did. You never once treated me with the same love and support you showed my siblings. But now that I have something you want, you're interested in moving forward. His face flushed with anger, then crumpled into something like despair. I know I failed you. I know that now. But you're still my daughter. Am I? Because I haven't felt like anyone's daughter for as long as I can remember. I've felt like the help. My father buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. It was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted, his voice muffled. Looking at him, this man who had been the architect of so much of my suffering, I felt a surprising flicker of pity. Not enough to absolve him, but enough to see him as a flawed, damaged human rather than the all-powerful figure he'd been in my childhood. I don't know if it can be fixed, I told him honestly. But any possibility starts with complete honesty and a genuine acknowledgement of the harm done. Not excuses, not justifications. Just truth. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. I can try to give you that. Then start by telling me the real reason. Why me? Why was I singled out? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with decades of pain. My father's answer would determine whether there was any path forward for our fractured family, or whether, like the truth that had remained buried for so long, some relationships were better left in the past. Hey folks, I'm getting to the most intense part of my story. If you're finding yourself pulled into my family drama, please hit that like button right now. I'd also love to know if you've ever discovered a family secret that changed everything. Stay with me as the confrontation with my father continues. Trust me, what he reveals next will shock you just as much as it shocked me. My father's answer came slowly, each word seeming to cause him physical pain. Your mother and I. We were young when we got married. We had Marcus right away, then Penelope followed quickly. We were struggling financially, both working multiple jobs. When your mother got pregnant with you, it wasn't planned. I nodded, having suspected something like this. So I was an unwanted pregnancy. No, well, yes, initially, he admitted. But then something happened that changed everything. Your mother's uncle, who we all knew as my father, offered to help us financially, but only if we agreed to name you after his mother, Briella. I frowned, confused. He offered financial support because of a name. It wasn't just that, my father continued, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. He also revealed the truth to us then, that I wasn't his biological son and that your mother was his niece. He said he saw it as fate that our families had intertwined this way, and that you would be the continuation of the true Lawson line. That still doesn't explain why you treated me like a servant, I pressed. My father's eyes couldn't meet mine. Your mother. She resented the conditions. She resented that her uncle, my father, seemed more interested in you than in our other children. But we needed the money, so we agreed. After you were born, he doted on you in a way he never had with Marcus or Penelope. I don't remember that, I said, genuinely surprised. It was when you were very young. By the time you were 4 or 5, your mother had convinced him to back off, saying it was creating family tension. But the damage was done. She saw you as a reminder of her family's interference in our lives. And you, I asked. What was your excuse? His shoulders slumped. I was weak. I let your mother set the tone, because I was dealing with my own issues about not being Harold's biological son. When I looked at you and saw how much you resembled him, how much you were a Lawson in ways I wasn't, it stirred up feelings I didn't want to face. So you punished an innocent child for adults' problems, I summarized flatly. Yes, he admitted, and the simple acknowledgement hit me harder than any justification could have. At first it was subtle, just treating you a bit differently. But over time it became our normal. The more your mother and I struggled in our marriage, the more we united in our treatment of you. It gave us something to agree on when we agreed on little else. You used me as a scapegoat to save your marriage, I said, the realization dawning with sickening clarity. He nodded, shame evident in every line of his face. And then, it was too late. We couldn't suddenly start treating you equally without admitting how wrong we'd been all along. So we doubled down year after year. Until Grandfather Harold died and exposed everything I finished. He confronted us about it several times over the years, my father confessed. The last time was about 5 years ago. He threatened to change his will then to tell you everything. We promised we'd change, and for a while we tried in small ways. But you didn't try very hard, I said, remembering no significant improvement in my treatment during that time. No, he agreed. We didn't. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of decades of mistreatment hanging between us. Finally I spoke. Thank you for being honest. It doesn't fix anything, but at least now I know. Can you ever forgive us? He asked, his voice small. I considered his question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something you're entitled to, Dad. It's something I might choose to give someday for my own peace. But reconciliation, having a relationship moving forward, that would require consistent long-term changes in behavior from both you and Mom. Are you willing to do that work? He hesitated, which told me everything I needed to know. That's what I thought, I said, rising from my seat. I think it's time for you to leave now. After he left, I sat alone in my hotel room, processing everything I'd learned. The truth, while painful, was also freeing. For the first time, I understood that the problem had never been me, it had been their inability to deal with their own issues. The realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. The following week, I met with Mr. Fleming to discuss my inheritance. Besides the house and financial assets, my grandfather had left me a sealed box with a note attached. For when you're ready to build your new life. Inside, I found family photo albums I'd never seen, focusing on the Lawson side of the family. There were pictures of my great-grandparents, my grandfather as a young man, and even a few precious photos of me as a baby with him, his face beaming with pride as he held me. There was also a leather-bound journal, where he had documented his thoughts about the family situation over the years, his regret at not intervening sooner, and his hopes for my future. Reading his words brought both tears and healing confirmation that at least one person in my family had truly loved me. Most surprising of all, I discovered an acceptance letter from Boston University's graduate program in creative writing, along with a note explaining that he had submitted an application on my behalf using writing samples I shared with him over the years. He had believed in my talent, even when I'd been forced to abandon my dreams. The tuition is covered, his note read. It's never too late to become who you were meant to be. 2 months after the funeral revelation, I made several life-changing decisions. First, I moved into my grandfather's house, finding comfort in the space that had belonged to someone who had valued me. Second, I accepted the place at Boston University, determined to finally pursue the education I'd been denied. The family remained fractured. My mother refused any contact, sending only a formal letter through her attorney, requesting financial support, a request I denied, with no small amount of satisfaction. My father made occasional awkward attempts at reconciliation, but without doing the deeper work required to truly understand the damage he'd caused. My siblings' reactions varied. Marcus, always the most entitled, sided completely with our parents, and even joined my mother's futile legal challenge to the will. Penelope maintained a cautious distance, occasionally sending text messages but never quite acknowledging the family's dysfunction. Victoria surprisingly made the most genuine effort, regularly meeting me for coffee and showing what seemed to be true remorse for her past behavior. "I'm trying to understand," she told me during one of our meetings. "I'm reading books about family dynamics and emotional abuse. I want to do better." Her efforts touched me, offering a glimmer of hope that at least one family relationship might be salvageable. As for me, I flourished in my newfound freedom. My professors praised my writing, and for the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to be valued for my mind, rather than my usefulness. I made real friends who knew nothing of my family history and appreciated me for who I truly was. I even began dating a kind, supportive man who showed me what healthy love looked like. 1 year after Grandfather Harold's funeral, I received an unexpected visitor at my home. My father's biological mother, Gloria, whom my grandfather had tracked down before his death. She had received a letter from him after his passing, explaining the situation and suggesting she might want to connect with her son and granddaughter. "I never knew about Richard," she told me over tea, in what was now my living room. "I was very young when I had the relationship with your grandmother. When we parted ways, I had no idea she was pregnant." Meeting Gloria added another piece to my understanding of our complex family story. She held no illusions about forming a close bond with my father, who had refused to meet her, but she and I developed a warm relationship that helped heal some of my family-shaped wounds. 3 years after Grandfather Harold's funeral, my life had transformed beyond recognition. I had completed my master's degree in creative writing and published my first novel, a thinly veiled account of my family experience that received critical acclaim for its honest portrayal of emotional abuse and eventual liberation. The dedication read simply, "For Harold, who gave me both roots and wings." The success of my book brought unexpected consequences. It thrust our family story into the public sphere, generating local media attention and uncomfortable scrutiny for my parents. My mother, always concerned with appearances, was mortified. My father, perhaps finally understanding the full impact of their treatment, reached out through a handwritten letter, the first communication in nearly a year. "I read your book," he wrote. "For the first time, I truly saw our family through your eyes. I can't undo the past, but I am getting help to understand how I became someone who could treat his child so cruelly. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that you've forced me to face truths I've been running from all my life." His words seemed genuine, but I had learned to approach family reconciliation with caution. I responded with a brief note acknowledging his efforts but making no promises. The most significant healing came from unexpected sources. Victoria had followed my example and sought therapy to unpack our dysfunctional family patterns. Our relationship evolved into something resembling true sisterhood as we navigated our shared history from different perspectives. "You know what I realized," she told me during a weekend visit to my home. "Mom and Dad didn't just hurt you. They hurt all of us by modeling such toxic behavior. They taught us that love is conditional and that people have value only when they're useful." Her insight impressed me. "That's exactly right. The difference is that you benefited from their dysfunction while I suffered from it. But none of us learned healthy family dynamics. I'm trying to unlearn it all before I have my own family someday," she admitted. "I'm terrified of repeating the pattern." Even more surprising was a tentative reconnection with Penelope. After reading my book, she sent a lengthy email apologizing for her complicity in my mistreatment. "I knew it wasn't right," she wrote, "but it was easier to go along with it than to question Mom and Dad. I'm ashamed of my cowardice." We met for lunch, awkward at first, but gradually finding common ground as adults rather than as the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. She brought photos of her newborn daughter, whom she had named Briella, a gesture that moved me deeply. "I want her to have your strength," Penelope explained, tears in her eyes. "And I want to raise her with the love and support you should have had." Marcus remained the lone holdout, still resentful of the inheritance, and unwilling to acknowledge any family wrongdoing. His choice was painful but also clarifying. Not every relationship could or should be salvaged. My mother never directly apologized, but I received word through Victoria that she had been profoundly affected by my book. She had taken early retirement from her law firm and was reportedly seeking therapy, something she had always dismissed as unnecessary. "She keeps a copy of your book on her nightstand," Victoria reported. "Dad says she rereads certain passages over and over, though she won't discuss it with anyone." This image, my proud, unyielding mother confronting her failures through my words, gave me a complicated satisfaction. Not revenge exactly, but accountability. In my personal life, I found joy I never imagined possible. My relationship with Daniel, the kind man I had begun dating during graduate school, deepened into love. He understood my family trauma without being defined by it, offering steady support as I navigated the complex emotions of estrangement and selective reconnection. On my 30th birthday, a milestone I celebrated with friends Victoria, Penelope, and Gloria, Daniel proposed. As I accepted, surrounded by people who truly saw and valued me, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. The inheritance that had initially seemed like merely financial freedom had actually given me something far more valuable, the truth that set me free from a lifetime of believing I was unworthy. Grandfather Harold's final gift had been the opportunity to reclaim my life and rebuild it on my own terms. That night, after everyone had left, and Daniel and I were sitting quietly on the porch swing, I shared a realization with him. "You know, for years I fantasized about confronting my family, making them admit how terribly they treated me," I said, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "I thought vindication would heal me. But that's not what happened," he asked, his arm warm around my shoulders. I shook my head. Vindication just confirmed what I already knew. What actually healed me was creating a life where their approval no longer mattered, where I could define myself instead of letting them define me. Daniel smiled, kissing my temple. "Your grandfather would be proud of who you've become." "I think he knew who I was all along," I replied. "He just needed to give me the chance to discover it for myself." As darkness fell and stars appeared in the night sky, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The path forward wasn't perfect, or complete. Family healing rarely is. But I had broken the cycle of abuse and created space for new, healthier connections. The truth had indeed surfaced, like a cork held under water too long, just as Grandfather Harold had predicted. And in its wake came not just the painful reckoning I had expected, but also the promise of a future defined by love rather than obligation, by choice rather than coercion. I had been treated like a maid by those who should have cherished me the most. But in the end, I had become the author of my own story, and that made all the difference. 5 years after Grandfather Harold's funeral, the day that had changed everything, I stood in the backyard of what was now truly my home, watching friends and family gather to celebrate my first pregnancy. Daniel moved among the guests, his proud smile warming my heart as he shared our news and accepted congratulations. The garden party was being held in the beautifully landscaped yard of my grandfather's house, my house now renovated and reimagined as a space of joy rather than a memorial. The old oak tree at the center still stood strong now, with a handmade swing hanging from its sturdy branches awaiting the child who would arrive in just a few months. Victoria arrived early to help with preparations, her support no longer surprising but still deeply appreciated. Our relationship had evolved into a genuine friendship, the painful past acknowledged, but no longer defining our interactions. Mom and Dad might stop by later, she mentioned casually as we arranged platters of food on the outdoor tables. Dad called me this morning. He seemed nervous but determined. I paused, a bowl of fruit salad in my hands. Are you sure that's a good idea? Victoria met my gaze directly. They've both been working hard in therapy. Mom even joined a support group for parents estranged from their children. I think they genuinely want to try again. The prospect of seeing my parents at what should be a joyful celebration stirred complicated emotions. Our contact over the past few years had been minimal and carefully controlled, occasional holiday cards, brief exchanges at Victoria's wedding 2 years earlier, one awkward dinner that had ended with my mother in tears, and my father apologizing repeatedly. I don't know, Vic, I said honestly. I'm in a good place now. I don't want to disrupt that. She nodded, understanding. That's fair. I can call them back and suggest another time. After a moment's reflection, I shook my head. No, let them come. But make it clear, this is a celebration, not a family therapy session. And I reserve the right to ask them to leave if it becomes too much. Victoria hugged me, her embrace conveying both gratitude and protection. I'll run interference if needed. You just focus on enjoying your day. As guests arrived, friends from graduate school, colleagues from the publishing house where I now worked as an editor, Daniel's warm and functional family, I felt a deep appreciation for the community I'd built. These relationships, chosen rather than inherited, had taught me what healthy connection looked like. Penelope arrived with her husband and their daughter, little Briella, now a precocious 4-year-old, who immediately demanded to see the baby in Auntie's tummy. I knelt down to her level, letting her place her small hand against my rounded belly. The baby's sleeping right now, I told her with a conspiratorial smile. But if you're patient, you might feel a kick later. She nodded seriously, clearly taking her role as future cousin very seriously. I'll teach the baby all the important things, she declared. Like how to make proper tea parties and which are the best hide-and-seek spots. As I watched her run off to explore the yard, Penelope squeezed my arm. She talks about you all the time, you know. Her brave aunt who writes books. You're her hero. The concept still felt strange that I, who had been made to feel worthless for so long, could be someone's hero. But it was also healing in ways I couldn't have anticipated. An hour into the party, when laughter and conversation filled the air and I was momentarily alone by the refreshment table, I felt a familiar tension creep into my shoulders. Turning, I saw them, my parents, standing awkwardly at the garden entrance, looking out of place and uncertain. My mother had aged visibly, the confident corporate attorney replaced by a woman who seemed smaller. Somehow her designer outfit impeccable as always, but her posture less commanding. My father stood beside her, one hand protectively at her elbow, his expression a mix of hope and trepidation. I took a deep breath, centering myself in the present rather than being pulled back into painful memories. Then I walked slowly toward them, conscious of Daniel's watchful gaze from across the yard, ready to intervene if needed. Thank you for coming, I said formally, not quite a welcome but not a rejection either. My mother's carefully composed expression trembled slightly. You have a beautiful home, she offered, clearly struggling to find neutral ground. The garden is lovely. Thank you. Grandfather always loved this space. I've tried to honor his vision while making it my own. An awkward silence fell between us, years of unspoken words creating a barrier that pleasantries couldn't breach. Finally, my father spoke. Briella, we don't want to intrude on your celebration. We can leave if our presence makes you uncomfortable. We wanted to see you. To offer our congratulations in person. The genuine emotion in his voice caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the father I had longed for as a child, concerned with my feelings, respectful of my boundaries. You can stay, I said after a moment. Let's keep things light today, okay? This is a happy occasion. They both nodded, visibly relieved. As I guided them toward the refreshments, introducing them simply as my parents to friends who didn't know our complicated history, I observed their interactions with careful detachment. They were trying, that much was clear. My mother complimented my home without any backhanded criticism. My father asked about my recent book tour with genuine interest. Neither mentioned the inheritance or the revelations that had followed Grandfather Harold's death. They were careful, cautious, treating me with a respect that felt foreign but not unwelcome. When Daniel joined us, wrapping an arm around my waist in a gesture both affectionate and protective, my mother actually smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You've created a wonderful life, Briella," she said quietly when we had a moment alone. The admission seemed to cost her something, an acknowledgement that I had flourished despite rather than because of her parenting. "Yes," I agreed simply. "I have." She nodded, blinking rapidly. "I've been reading about generational trauma in my support group. About how patterns of behavior get passed down unless someone finds the courage to break the cycle." She met my eyes directly for the first time that day. "I think you're breaking the cycle? For your child and for all of us." The recognition that I had accomplished something significant, not just in escaping their mistreatment, but in refusing to perpetuate it, touched something deep within me. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to leave, my father approached me one last time. "We won't intrude on your life unless invited," he said quietly. "But if you ever feel ready for more contact, even just occasional family dinners or holidays, we would welcome that. On your terms, of course." I studied his face, looking for the manipulative father of my childhood. Instead, I saw an aging man hoping for a chance at redemption. "I'll think about it," I promised, not committing but not refusing either. After they left, Daniel found me sitting alone beneath the oak tree, my hand resting on my belly, where our daughter, we had recently learned the gender, was making her presence known with energetic kicks. "You okay?" he asked, settling beside me on the bench. "I think so," I replied thoughtfully. "It's strange. For so long I defined myself in opposition to them, determined to be everything they weren't. But now I'm starting to see that true healing isn't about them at all. It's about choosing who I want to be, regardless of my past." Daniel smiled, covering my hand with his. "And who do you want to be?" "A good mother," I said immediately. "A loving partner. A writer who tells stories that matter. A friend who shows up. A person who breaks harmful cycles rather than perpetuating them." "You're already all those things," he assured me. As twilight settled over the garden, casting long shadows and painting the sky in deepening shades of blue, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me here. From the family maid to the master of my own destiny. From powerlessness to autonomy. From invisibility to being truly seen. The path hadn't been easy, and the wounds of my childhood would always be part of my story. But they no longer defined me. What defined me now were my choices, my values, my ability to create the family I'd always deserved. In less than 3 months, I would hold my daughter in my arms. She would never know what it felt like to be less loved than her siblings, to have her worth measured by her usefulness, to doubt her place in her family. She would grow up knowing she was cherished simply for existing, not for what she could do for others. That certainty that the cycle of emotional abuse that had damaged so many generations of my family would end with me felt like the most meaningful inheritance of all. More valuable than the house, the money, or even the truth itself was this opportunity to begin anew, to write a different story for the next generation. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, I made a silent promise to both my grandfather and my unborn daughter. The legacy of the Lawson family would no longer be one of secrets and hurt, but of healing and hope. And in that transformation lay the greatest justice of all. Wow, what a journey this has been to share with all of you. If my family's story of betrayal and ultimate justice resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever experienced a moment when family karma came full circle, or discovered a family secret that changed everything? Your stories help me feel less alone in mine. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. It really helps the algorithm show my content to others who might need to hear they're not alone in their family struggles. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming family trauma and finding your own path to healing. And if you know someone who might find comfort or strength in this story, please share it with them. Thank you for being here with me today. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into, and it's never too late to rewrite your story. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.